Hey everyone, welcome to KSSP Podcast. I am Spencer.
And I'm Katie. And today we are going to be talking about stress, its effects on the body, and we're just going to be talking about stress general today. So, first, I have an article. This is Stress's Effects on the Body. It affects all systems of the body, including the musculoskeletal, respiratory, cardiovascular, endocrine, gastrointestinal, nervous, and reproductive systems. All right. So our bodies are well equipped to handle stress in small doses, but when that stress becomes long-term or chronic, it can have serious effects on your body. So the musculoskeletal system. When the body is stressed, muscles tense up. Muscle tension is almost a reflex reaction to stress, the body's way of guarding against injury and pain. So with sudden onset stress, the muscles tense up all at once and then release their tension when the stress passes. Chronic stress causes the muscles in the body to be in a lot more or less constant state of guardedness. When muscles are taut and tense for long periods of time, this may trigger other reactions of the body and even promote stress-related disorders. For example, both tension-type headache and migraine headache are associated with chronic muscle tension in the area of the shoulders, neck, and head. Musculoskeletal pain in the low back and upper extremities has also been linked to stress, especially job stress. Millions of individuals suffer from chronic painful conditions secondary to musculoskeletal disorders. Often, but not always, there may be an injury that sets off the chronic painful state. What determines whether or not an injured person goes on to suffer from chronic pain is how they respond to the injury. Individuals who are fearful of pain and re-injury and who seek only a physical cause and cure for the injury generally have a worse recovery than individuals who maintain a certain level of moderate physician-supervised activity. Muscle tension and eventually muscle atrophy due to disuse of the body all promote chronic stress-related musculoskeletal conditions. Relaxation techniques and other stress-relieving activities and therapies have been shown to effectively reduce muscle tension, decrease the incidence of certain stress-related disorders such as headache, and increase a sense of well-being. For those who develop chronic pain conditions, stress-relieving activities have been shown to improve mood and daily function. All right, and then the respiratory system. Respiratory system supplies oxygen to cells and removes carbon dioxide waste from the body. Air comes in through the nose and goes through the larynx and the throat, down through the trachea, and into the lungs through the bronchi. The bronchioles then transfer oxygen to red blood cells for circulation. Stress and strong emotions can present with respiratory symptoms, such as shortness of breath and rapid breathing as the airway between the nose and lung constricts. For people without respiratory disease, this is generally not a problem as the body can manage the additional work to breathe comfortably, but psychological stressors can exacerbate breathing problems for people with pre-existing respiratory diseases such as asthma and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, COPD, includes emphysema and chronic bronchitis. Some studies show that acute stress, such as death of a loved one, can actually trigger asthma attacks. In addition, the rapid breathing or hyperventilation caused by stress can bring on a panic attack in someone prone to panic attacks. Working with the psychologist to help develop relaxation, breathing, and other cognitive behavioral strategies can help. Cardiovascular system. The heart and blood vessels comprise the two elements of the cardiovascular system that works together in providing nourishment and oxygen to organs of the body. The activity of these two elements is also coordinated in the body's response to stress, acute stress, stress that is momentary or short-term, such as meeting deadlines, being stuck in traffic, or suddenly slamming on the brakes to avoid an accident. Ooh, that's a big one that makes my heart go fast.
Yeah.
That last one, yeah, the slamming the brakes. But yeah, that can cause an increase in heart rate and stronger contractions of the heart muscle. With the stress hormones, adrenaline, noradrenaline, and cortisol, acting as messengers for these effects. In addition, the blood vessels that direct blood to the large muscles in the heart dilate, thereby increasing the amount of blood pumped to these parts of the body, elevating blood pressure. This is also known as the fight or flight response. Once the acute stress episode is passed, the body returns to its normal state. Chronic stress or a constant stress experience over a prolonged period of time can contribute to long-term problems for heart and blood vessels. The consistent and ongoing increase in heart rate and elevated levels of stress hormones and of blood pressure can take a toll on the body. This long-term ongoing stress can increase the risk for hypertension, heart attack, or stroke. Repeated acute stress and persistent chronic stress may also contribute to inflammation in the circulatory system, particularly in the coronary arteries. And this is one pathway that is thought to tie stress to heart attack. It also appears how a person responds to stress can affect it can affect cholesterol levels. The risk for heart disease associated with stress appears to differ for women, depending on whether the woman is premenopausal or postmenopausal. Levels of estrogen in premenopausal women appears to help blood vessels respond better during stress, thereby helping their bodies to better handle stress and protecting them against heart disease. Postmenopausal women lose this level of protection due to the loss of estrogen, therefore putting them at a greater risk for effects of stress on heart disease. So, all right, and then the endocrine system. When someone perceives a situation to be challenging, threatening, or uncontrollable, the brain initiates a cascade of events involving the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, which is the primary driver of the endocrine stress response. This ultimately results in an increase in the production of steroid hormones called glucocorticoids, which includes cortisol, often referred to as the stress hormone. The HPA axis. During times of stress, the hypothalamus, a collection of nuclei that connect to the brain and the endocrine system, signals the pituitary gland to produce a hormone, which in turn signals the adrenal glands located above the kidneys to increase the production of cortisol. Cortisol increases the level of energy fuel available by mobilizing glucose and fatty acids from the liver. Cortisol is normally produced in varying levels throughout the day, typically increasing in concentration upon waking and slowly declining throughout the day, providing a daily cycle of energy. During a stressful event, an increase in cortisol can provide the energy required to deal with prolonged or extreme challenge. Stress and health. Glucocorticoids, including cortisol, are important for regulating the immune system and reducing inflammation. While this is valuable during stressful or threatening situations where injury might result in the increased immune system activation, chronic stress can result in impaired communication between the immune system and the HPA axis. This impaired communication has been linked to the future development of numerous physical and mental health conditions, including chronic fatigue, metabolic disorders, examples like diabetes and obesity, depression, and immune disorders. All right, and the gastrointestinal system. The gut has hundreds of millions of neurons which can function fairly independently and are in constant communication with the brain, explaining the ability to feel butterflies in the stomach. Stress can affect this brain-gut communication and may trigger pain, bloating, and other gut discomfort to be felt more easily. The gut is also inhabited by millions of bacteria, which can influence its health and the brain's health, which can impact the ability to think and affect emotions. And I think they're talking about the microbiomes there.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's what they're talking about.
I would think so.
Yeah. And then stress is associated with changes in gut bacteria, which in turn can influence mood. Thus, the gut's nerves and bacteria strongly influence the brain and vice versa. Early life stress can change the development of the nervous system as well as how the body reacts to stress. These changes can increase the risk of later for gut diseases or dysfunctioning. And we are going to talk about the ACE quiz as well in a little bit. So that will contribute to early life stress. And then the esophagus. When stressed, individuals may eat more or much less than usual. More or different foods or an increase in the use of alcohol or tobacco can result in heartburn or acid reflux. Stress or exhaustion can also increase the severity of regularly occurring heartburn pain. A rare case of spasms in the esophagus can be set off by intense stress and can be easily mistaken for a heart attack. Stress also may make swallowing foods difficult or increase the amount of air that is swallowed, which increases burping, gassiness, and bloating. I do burp a lot. Maybe that's why. Maybe I'm just stressed. Stomach. Stress may make pain, bloating, nausea, and other stomach discomfort felt more easily. Vomiting may occur if the stress is severe enough. Furthermore, stress may occur in an unnecessary increase or decrease in appetite. Unhealthy diets may, in turn, deteriorate one's mood. Contrary to popular belief, stress does not increase acid production in the stomach, nor cause stomach ulcers. The latter are actually caused by a bacterial infection, when stress ulcers may become more bothersome. Bowel. Stress can also make pain, bloating, or discomfort felt more easily in the bowels. It can affect how quickly food moves through the body, which can cause either diarrhea or constipation. Furthermore, stress can induce muscle spasms in the bowel, which can be painful. Stress can affect digestion and what nutrients the intestines absorb. Gas production related to nutrient absorption may increase. The intestines have a tight barrier to protect the body from most food-related bacteria. Stress can make the intestinal barrier weaker and allow gut bacteria to enter the body. Although most of these bacteria are easily taken care of by the immune system and do not make us sick, the constant low need for inflammatory action can lead to chronic mild symptoms. Stress especially affects people with chronic bowel disorders such as inflammatory bowel disease or irritable bowel syndrome. This may be due to the gut nerves being more sensitive, change in gut microbiota, changes in how quickly food moves through the gut, and or changes in the gut immune responses. All right, and then we've got the nervous system. It has several divisions: the central division involving the brain and spinal cord, and the peripheral division consisting of the autonomic and somatic nervous systems. The autonomic nervous system has a direct role in physical response to stress and is divided into the sympathetic nervous system, SNS, and the parasympathetic nervous system, PNS. When the body is stressed, the SNS contributes to what is known as fight or flight response. The body shifts its energy towards fighting off a life threat or fleeing from an enemy. The SNS signals the adrenal glands to release hormones called adrenaline, epinephrine, and cortisol. These hormones, together with direct actions of autonomic nerves, cause the heart to beat faster, respiration rate to increase, blood vessels in the arms and legs to dilate, digestive processes to change, and glucose levels, sugar energy, in the bloodstream to increase to deal with the emergency. The SNS response is fairly sudden in order to prepare the body to respond to an emergency situation or acute stress, short-term stressors. Once the crisis is over, the body usually returns to the pre-emergency unstressed state. This recovery is facilitated by the PNS, which generally has opposing effects to the SNS. So they're the opposites, basically, but they balance each other out. But PNS overactivity can also contribute to stress reactions, for example, by promoting bronchoconstriction, example in asthma, or exaggerated vasodilation and compromised blood circulation. Both SNS and PNS have powerful interactions with the immune system, which can also modulate stress reactions. The central nervous system is particularly important in triggering stress responses as it regulates the autonomic nervous system and plays a central role in interpreting context as potentially threatening. Chronic stress. Experiencing stressors over a prolonged period of time can result in a long-term drain on the body. As the autonomic nervous system continues to trigger physical reactions, it causes a wear and tear on the body. It's not so much what chronic stress does to the nervous system, but what continuous activation of the nervous system does to other bodily systems that becomes problematic. All right, so the male reproductive system. It's influenced by the nervous system. The parasympathetic part of the nervous system causes relaxation, whereas the sympathetic part causes arousal. In male anatomy, the autonomic nervous system, also known as the fight or flight response, produces testosterone and activates the sympathetic nervous system, which creates arousal. Stress causes the body to release the hormone cortisol, which is produced by the adrenal glands. Cortisol is important to blood pressure regulation and the normal functioning of several body systems, including cardiovascular, circulatory, and male reproduction. Excess amounts of cortisol can affect the normal biochemical functioning of the male reproductive system. Sexual desire. Chronic stress, ongoing stress over an extended period of time can affect testosterone production, resulting in a decline in sex drive or libido, and can even cause erectile dysfunction or impotence. Reproduction. Chronic stress can also negatively impact sperm production and maturation. Okay. I've never seen that word before, but I know what it means. Just a weird word. Sorry. The chronic stress can also negatively impact sperm production and maturation, causing difficulties in couples who are trying to conceive. Researchers have found that men who experienced 2 or more stressful life events in the past year had a lower percentage of sperm mobility, ability to swim, and a lower percentage of sperm of normal morphology, size and shape, compared with men who did not experience any stressful life events. Diseases of the reproductive system. When stress affects the immune system, the body can become vulnerable to infection. In the male anatomy, infections to the testes, prostate gland, and urethra can affect normal male reproductive functioning. All right, and then we're going to just go over this last one here. Female reproductive system. Menstruation. Stress may affect menstruation among adolescent girls and women in several ways. For example, high levels of stress may be associated with absent or irregular menstrual cycles, more painful periods, and changes in the length of cycles. Sexual desire. Women juggle personal, family, professional, financial, and a broad range of other demands across their lifespan. Stress, distraction, fatigue, etc. may reduce sexual desire, especially when women are simultaneously caring for young children or other ill family members, coping with chronic medical problems, feeling depressed, experiencing relationship difficulties or abuse, or dealing with work problems, etc. Pregnancy. Stress can have a significant impact on a woman's reproductive plans. Stress can negatively impact a woman's ability to conceive, the health of her pregnancy, and her postpartum adjustment. Depression is the leading complication of pregnancy and postpartum adjustment. Excess stress increases the likelihood of developing depression and anxiety during this time. Maternal stress can negatively impact fetal and ongoing childhood development and disrupt bonding with the baby in the weeks and months following delivery. Premenstrual syndrome. Stress may make premenstrual symptoms worse or more difficult to cope with, and premenstrual symptoms may be stressful for many women. These symptoms include cramping, fluid retention and bloating, negative mood, feeling irritable and blue, and mood swings. Menopause. As menopause approaches, hormone levels fluctuate rapidly. These changes are associated with anxiety, mood swings, and feelings of distress. Thus, menopause can be a stressor in and of itself. Some of the physical changes associated with menopause, especially hot flashes, can be difficult to cope with. Furthermore, emotional distress may cause the physical symptoms to be worse. For example, women who are more anxious may experience an increased number of hot flashes and/or more severe or intense hot flashes. Diseases of the reproductive system. When stress is high, there is an increased chance of exacerbation of symptoms of reproductive diseases states, such as herpes simplex virus or polycystic ovarian syndrome. The diagnosis and treatment of reproductive cancers can cause significant stress, which warrants additional attention and support. So, all right, and stress management. The beneficial strategies for stress management include maintaining a healthy social support network, engaging in regular exercise, and getting an adequate amount of sleep each night. And I would say these things are easier said than done, but at the same time, they're not impossible. According to NCBI of the NIH, stress can cause an imbalance of neural circuitry. Stress can cause an imbalance of neural circuitry, subserving cognition, decision making, anxiety, and mood that can increase or decrease expression of those behaviors and behavioral states. This imbalance, in turn, affects systemic physiology via neuroendocrine, autonomic, immune, and metabolic mediators. Now you can go on to your anatomy article or anatomy articles.
Yes, so I'm gonna start just going over Wikipedia. Some of this will probably be a repeat of what you said, but that's okay because reiteration can help people understand it better sometimes. So I'm just going to kind of go over, we'll start with this. So I just wanted to go over biological background. Stress can have many profound effects on the human biological systems. Biology primarily attempts to explain major concepts of stress using a stimulus response paradigm, broadly comparable to how a psychobiological sensory system operates. The central nervous system, brain and spinal cord, plays a crucial role in the body's stress-related mechanisms. Whether one should interpret these mechanisms as the body's response to a stressor or embody the act of stress itself is part of the ambiguity in defining what exactly stress is. The central nervous system works closely with the body's endocrine system to regulate these mechanisms. The sympathetic nervous system becomes primarily active during a stress response, regulating many of the body's physiological functions in ways that ought to make an organism more adaptive to its environment. Below there follows a brief biological background of neuroanatomy and neurochemistry and how they relate to stress. Stress, either severe acute stress or chronic low-grade stress, may induce abnormalities in three principal regulatory systems in the body: serotonin systems, catecholamine systems, and the hypothalamic pituitary adrenocortical axis. aggressive behaviors has also been associated with abnormalities in these systems. So then I wanted to also just go over biology of stress, because I like sometimes going more in depth. So the brain endocrine interactions and the brain endocrine interactions are relevant in the translation of stress into physiological and psychological changes. The autonomic nervous system, ANS, as mentioned above, plays an important role in translating stress into a response. The ANS responds reflectively to both physical stressors and to higher level inputs from the brain. The ANS is composed of the parasympathetic nervous system and the sympathetic nervous system, two branches that are both tonically active with opposing activities. The ANS directly innervates tissue through the postganglionic nerves, which is controlled by preganglionic neurons originating in the intermediolateral cell column. The ANS receives inputs from the medulla, hypothalamus, limbic system, prefrontal cortex, midbrain, and monoamine nuclei. The activity of the sympathetic nervous system drives what is called the fight or flight response. The fight or flight response to emergency or stress involves mydriasis, increased heart rate and forced contraction, vasoconstriction, bronchodilation, glucogenesis, lipolysis, sweating, decreased motility of the digestive system, secretion of the epinephrine and cortisol from the adrenal medulla, and relaxation of the bladder wall. This parasympathetic nervous system, rest and digest, involves return to maintaining homeostasis and involves meiosis, bronchoconstriction, increased activity of the digestive system, and contraction of the bladder walls. Complex relationships between protective and vulnerability factors on the effect of childhood home stress on psychological illness, cardiovascular illness, and adaptation have been observed. ANS-related mechanisms are thought to contribute to increased risk of cardiovascular disease after major stressful events. The HPA axis is a neuroendocrine system that mediates a stress response. Neurons in the hypothalamus, particularly the paraventricular nucleus, release vasopressin and corticotropin-releasing hormone, which travel through the hypophyseal portal vessel, where they travel to and bind to the corticotropin-releasing hormone receptor on the anterior pituitary gland. Multiple CRH peptides have been identified, and receptors have been identified on multiple areas in the brain, including the amygdala. CRH is the main regulatory molecule of the release of ACTH. The secretion of ACTH into systemic circulation allows it to bind to and activate melanocortin receptor, where it stimulates the release of steroid hormones. Steroid hormones bind to glucocorticoid receptors in the brain, providing negative feedback by reducing ACTH release. Some evidence supports a second long-term feedback that is non-sensitive to cortisol secretion. The PVN of the hypothalamus receives inputs from the nucleus of the solitary tract and lamina terminalis. Through these inputs, it receives and can respond to changes in blood. The PVN innervation from the brainstem nuclei, particularly the noradrenergic nuclei, stimulates CRH release. Other regions of the hypothalamus, both directly and indirectly, inhibit HPA axis activity. Hypothalamic neurons involved in regulating energy balance also influence HPA axis activity through the release of neurotransmitters such as neuropeptide Y, which stimulates HPA axis activity. Generally, the amygdala stimulates and the prefrontal cortex and hippocampus attenuate HPA axis activity. However, complex relationships do exist between these regions. The immune system may be heavily influenced by stress. The sympathetic nervous system innervates various immunological structures such as bone marrow and the spleen, allowing for it to regulate immune function. The adrenergic substances released by the sympathetic nervous system can also bind to and influence various immunological cells, further providing a connection between the systems. The HPA axis ultimately results in the release of cortisol, which generally has immunosuppressive effects. However, the effect of stress on the immune system is disputed, and various models have been proposed in an attempt to account for both the supposedly immunodeficiency-linked diseases and diseases involving hyperactivation of the immune system. One model proposed to account for this suggests a push towards an imbalance of cellular immunity and a humoral immunity. The proposed imbalance involved hyperactivity of the Th2 system, leading to some forms of immune hypersensitivity, which also increasing risk of some illness associated with decreased immune system functions, such as infection and cancer. And then I was just going to also briefly go over some of these effects of chronic stress. So immunological. Acute time-limited stressors or stressors that lasted less than 2 hours results in an upregulation of natural immunity and downregulation of specific immunity. This type of stress saw an increase in granulocytes, natural killer cells, IgA, interleukin-6, and an increase in cell cytotoxicity. Brief naturalistic stressors elicit a shift from Th1 cellular to Th2 humoral immunity, while decreased T cell proliferation and natural killer cell cytotoxicity. Stressful event sequences did not elicit a consistent immune response. However, some observations, such as decreased T cell proliferation and cytotoxicity, increase or decrease in natural killer cell cytotoxicity, and an increase in mitogen PHA. Chronic stress elicited a shift toward Th2 immunity, as well as decreased interleukin 2, T cell proliferation, and antibody response to the influenza vaccine. Distant stressors did not consistently elicit a change in immune function. Another response to high impacts of chronic stress that lasts for a long period of time is more immune dysfunction and more metabolic dysfunction. It is proven in studies that when continuously being in a stressful situation, it is more likely to get sick. Also, when being exposed to stress, your body metabolizes the food in a certain way that adds extra calories to your meal, regardless of the nutritional values of the food. Infectious. Some studies have observed increased risk of upper respiratory tract infection during chronic life stress. In patients with HIV, increased life stress and cortisol was associated with poorer progression of HIV. Also, with an increased level of stress, studies have proven evidence that it can reactivate latent herpes viruses. And then chronic disease. A link has been suggested between chronic stress and cardiovascular disease. Stress appears to play a role in hypertension and may further predispose people to other conditions associated with hypertension. Stress may precipitate abuse of drugs and or alcohol. Stress may also contribute to aging and chronic diseases in aging, such as depression and metabolic disorders. The immune system also plays a role in stress in the early stages of wound healing. It is responsible for preparing the tissue for repair and promoting recruitment of certain cells to the wound area. Consistent with the fact that stress alters the production of cytokines, Graham et al. Found that chronic stress associated with caregiving for a person with Alzheimer's disease leads to delayed wound healing. Results indicated that biopsy wounds healed 25% more slowly in the chronically stressed group or those caring for a person with Alzheimer's. So that was Wikipedia. Then I have an article here from National Library of Medicine, just also kind of talking about immune function. The good, the bad, and the beautiful. And this is just an abstract. So although the concept of stress has earned a bad reputation, it is important to recognize that the adaptive purpose of a physiological stress response is to promote survival during fight or flight. While long-term stress is generally harmful, short-term stress can be protective as it prepares the organism to deal with challenges. This review discusses the immune effects of biological stress responses that can be induced by psychological, physiological, or physical, including exercise stressors. We have proposed that short-term stress is one of the nature's fundamental but underappreciated survival mechanisms that could be clinically harnessed to enhance immunoprotection. Short-term, lasting from minutes to hours, stress experienced during immune activation enhances innate/primary and adaptive/secondary immune responses. Mechanisms of immunoenhancement include changes in dendritic cell, neutrophil, macrophage, and lymphocyte trafficking, maturation, and function, as well as local and systemic production of cytokines. In contrast, long-term stress suppresses or dysregulates innate and adaptive immune response by altering the type 1, type 2 cytokine balance, inducing low-grade chronic inflammation, and suppressing numbers, trafficking, and function of immunoprotective cells. Chronic stress may also increase susceptibility to some types of cancer by suppressing type 1 cytokines and protective T cells and increasing regulatory/suppressor T cell function. Here we classify immune responses as being protective, pathological, or regulatory, and discuss good versus bad effects of stress on health. Thus, short-term stress can enhance the acquisition and or expression of immunoprotective, wound healing, vaccination, anti-infectious agent, anti-tumor, or immunopathological, pro-inflammatory autoimmune responses. In contrast, chronic stress can suppress protective immune responses and or exacerbate pathological immune responses. Studies such as the ones discussed here could provide mechanistic targets and conceptual frameworks for pharmacological and/or biobehavioral interventions designed to enhance the effects of good stress, minimize the effects of bad stress, and maximally promote health and healing. And then I have one more on immune, because I just think it's important that we understand how stress affects our immune system. So this one is called Psychological Stress in the Human Immune System, a meta-analytic study of 30 years of inquiry. And I think this one I had specific, because we already talked about kind of how the immune system works. I think I wanted to read this part. So, models of stress, the immune system, and health. Conceptualizations of the nature of the relationship between stress and the immune system have changed over time. Silas' finding of thymic involution led to an initial model in which stress is broadly immunosuppressive. Early human studies supported this model, reporting that chronic forms of stress were accompanied by reduced natural killer cell cytotoxicity, suppressed lymphocyte proliferative responses, and blunted humoral responses to immunization. Diminished immune responses of this nature were assumed to be responsible for the heightened incidence of infectious and neoplastic diseases found among chronically stressed individuals. Although the global immunosuppression model enjoyed long popularity and continues to be influential, the broad decreases in immune function it predicts would not have been evolutionarily adaptive in life-threatening circumstances. DeBar and McQuinn proposed that acute fight-or-flight stressors should instead cause redistribution of immune cells into the compartments in which they can act the most quickly and efficiently against invaders. In a series of experiments with mice, they found that during acute stress, T cells selectively redistributed into the skin, where they contributed to enhancement of the immune response. In contrast, during chronic stress, T cells were shunted away from the skin, and the immune response to skin test challenge was diminished. On the basis of these findings, they proposed a biphasic model in which acute stress enhances and chronic stress suppresses the immune response. A modification of this model posits that short-term changes in all components of the immune system, natural and specific, are unlikely to occur because they would expend too much energy to be adaptive in life-threatening circumstances. Instead, stress should shift the balance of the immune response towards activating natural processes and diminishing specific processes. The premise underlying this model is that natural immune responses are better suited to managing the potential complications of life-threatening situations than specific immune responses because they can unfold much more rapidly, are subject to fewer inhibitory constraints, and require less energy to be diverted from other bodily systems that support the fight-or-flight response. Even with this modification of the biphasic model, neither it nor the global immunosuppression model sufficiently explains findings that link chronic stress with both disease outcomes associated with inadequate immunity, infectious and neoplastic disease, and disease outcomes associated with excessive immune activity, allergic and autoimmune disease. To resolve this paradox, some researchers have chosen to focus on how chronic stress might shift the balance of the immune response. The most well-known of these models hypothesizes that chronic stress elicits simultaneous enhancement and suppression of the immune response by altering patterns of cytokine secretion. Th1 cytokines, which activate cellular immunity to provide defense against many kinds of infection and some kinds of neoplastic disease, are suppressed. This suppression has permissive effects on production of Th2 cytokines, which activate humoral immunity and exacerbate allergy and many kinds of autoimmune disease.
I have a question. I don't know if you know
Yes.
the answer. But okay. So I see like Th2 and Th1, and I know our brains naturally produce like a small level of THC. Like, are those related to that, or is that like a completely different thing?
I think they're completely different.
Are they? Okay.
Yeah, I think so. Because I think these are, I guess I'd have to look into it, but I don't think, yeah, I think they're different. I guess we'd have to look into it to be sure,
Yeah.
but I think they're different. But maybe we can look into it.
I'm gonna Google.
Okay. I'm going to keep reading, but then.
Oh yeah. Well,
Because I'm almost done with.
Dep2-9 THC regulates Th1 and Th2 cytokine.
Oh, it does?
It's a human, yeah. Yep.
Interesting. That makes sense though
Yeah,
to me.
regulates Th1, Th2 cytokine balance and activated human T cells. Yep.
Okay. Interesting.
And this is from the National Library of Medicine as well, so I trust it.
That makes sense though. Like I think there's again, like we mentioned in our marijuana, there's a lot, or I guess I don't know if we mentioned it, but there is a lot that still needs to be studied
Yeah,
to
for
figure
sure.
out all these. Because I think it personally, I mean, not from personal experience per se, but just personally in my head, it would make sense that it could help immune function and inflammation, like decrease or like make immune function more effective. I would think, but I don't know for sure. And then I would think that it could help decrease or regulate those I guess I would say
Mhm.
regulate because it sometimes you want an increased immune function, sometimes you want a decrease. It just kind of depends on the situation. But
Yeah.
and same with inflammation. So I just think it would help regulate. So I think in my head it would be a good regulator, THC and CBD. And that's my theory, I guess, on
Okay.
marijuana. But um so, this shift can occur via the effects of stress hormones such as cortisol. Th1 to Th2 shift changes the balance of the immune response without necessarily changing the overall level of activation or function within the system, because a diminished Th1 mediated cellular immune response could increase vulnerability to infection and neoplastic disease, and an enhanced Th2 mediated humoral immune response could increase vulnerability to autoimmune and allergic diseases. This cytokine shift model also is able to reconcile patterns of stress-related immune change with patterns of stress-related disease outcomes. So then I think I just wanted to read this one here too quick from this article. So who is vulnerable to stress-induced immune changes? If their stress response in the immune system evolved, a healthy organism should not be adversely affected by activation of this response because such an effect would likely have been selected against. Although there is direct evidence that stress-related immunosuppression can increase vulnerability to disease in animals, there is little or no evidence linking stress-related immune change in healthy humans to disease vulnerability. Even large stress-induced immune changes can have small clinical consequences because of the redundancy of the immune system's components or because they do not persist for a sufficient duration to enhance disease susceptibility. In short, the immune system is remarkably flexible and capable of substantial change without compromising an otherwise healthy host. However, the flexibility of the immune system can be compromised by age and disease. As humans age, the immune system becomes senescent. As a consequence, older adults are less able to respond to vaccines and mount cellular immune responses, which in turn may contribute to early mortality. The decreased ability of the immune system to respond to stimulation is one indicator of its loss of flexibility. Loss of self-regulation is also characteristic of disease states. In autoimmune disease, for example, the immune system treats self-tissue as an invader, attacking it and causing pathology such as multiple sclerosis, rheumatoid arthritis, Crohn's disease, and lupus. Immune reactions can also be exaggerated and pathological, as in asthma, and suggest loss of self-regulation. Finally, infection with HIV progressively incapacitates T helper cells, leading to loss of the regulation usually provided by these cells. Although each of these diseases has distinct clinical consequences, the change in the immune system from flexible and balanced to inflexible and unbalanced suggests increased vulnerability to stress-related immune dysregulation. Furthermore, dysregulation in the presence of disease may have clinical consequences.
Yeah. I
So I
just
do
want to
kind of,
throw out diabetes as well. As like, it's not completely an autoimmune, it's not the same as like those other autoimmune disorders, but it is technically an autoimmune disorder still.
yeah, I think type 1. I
Type
don't think type
1,
2
type
is
1,
though,
yeah.
right? Yeah,
I don't
okay,
know
yeah.
about type 2. I mean,
Because type 2 is more just like the insulin resist, like,
it's more, yeah, it's more the insulin resistance.
yeah, than an autoimmune. But type 1,
But type
yes.
1, yeah, so yeah.
And yeah, I do wonder. They should definitely do some studies on THC and see if it helps regulate some of. I mean, I'm not gonna claim that THC would cure these
Yeah, it
autoimmune
wouldn't
conditions, but
cure,
I do wonder if it
cure
would help
anything, but it does help.
regulate their immune systems to where it's not as much, or like if it would just help, like with regulation of the immune
Yeah.
system, which could, in theory, potentially help with those conditions.
I know it's good for the nervous system. We didn't talk about it in yesterday's episode, but um, like with epilepsy and multiple sclerosis, for example, like they've seen really good results. in general, just over time with medical marijuana use.
Okay. I know about epilepsy for sure, because I know that's a common
Yeah.
usage for medical marijuana. We can always do another episode about like
Yeah,
more
there's a lot you
specific.
can go over with
Yeah,
that.
so we can always do another episode too. But then I wanted to go just over the conclusion on this one. Stress-related disease emerges predominantly out of the fact that we so often activate a physiological system that has evolved for responding to acute physical emergencies, but we turn it on for months on end, worrying about mortgages, relationships, and promotions. The result of this meta-analysis support this assertion in one sense. Stressors with the temporal parameters of the fight or flight situations faced by humans' evolutionary ancestors elicited potentially beneficial changes in the immune system. The more a stressor deviated from those parameters by becoming more chronic, however, the more components of the immune system were affected in a potentially detrimental way. Further research is needed to support two other ideas elicited by this quote: the idea that subjective experience, such as worry, is more likely to result in stress-related immune change than objective experience, and the idea that stress-related immune change results in stress-related disease. Though the results of the meta-analysis were not encouraging on the first point, many of these studies suffered from methodological limitations. We hope that these results will inform investigations that go beyond the relationship between a stressful event and an immune parameter to investigate the psychological phenomena that mediate that relationship. Finally, these results can also inform investigations into stress, immunity, and disease process. Whether the disease is characterized by natural specific immunity, its cytokine profile, and its regulation by anti-inflammatory agents such as cortisol may determine the disparate effects of different kinds of stressors.
Okay.
So then I kind of wanted another. So that was kind of stress and the immune response, because I think it's just important to understand, in theory, how stress can make us sick, because it can worsen our immune response, in theory. And another topic that I kind of wanted to talk about was stress and inflammation. Because again, I think that inflammation is a big player, I'd say, in disease processes too, or some of them. So this is Everyday Health. Here's how stress and inflammation are linked. Research shows that stress can cause inflammation in the body, leading to a number of chronic health conditions. So let me see. I don't think this one was long, but we'll just go do it. We'll start with, I think we kind of talked about what happens when you're stressed. I can skip that part.
Yeah.
But we'll talk about what is inflammation. So inflammation is the body's response to a threat, whether it's a foreign invader such as bacteria, virus, or cancer, a transplanted organ which the body sees as foreign, or even a psychological or emotional stressor. In response, the immune system sends out an army of chemicals called pro-inflammatory cytokines to attack the invaders. Think of inflammation as a sickness behavior, says this doctor, director of the Center for Depression Research and Clinical Care at UT Southwestern Medical Center in Dallas. Okay. Inflammation, he says, causes your body to act flu-ish, even in the absence of the flu virus. Pro-inflammatory cytokines usually do their job and then disappear, but when stress is chronic, they are upregulated in your system, meaning the cycle of stress and inflammatory response gets habituated in the body, explains Gupta. Over time, these cytokines may perpetuate themselves. That's when inflammation starts to cause deleterious effects on the body, and while no one is completely sure why, there are many mechanisms responsible for diseases. What many conditions have in common is chronic low-level inflammation. So some chronic conditions linked to stress: rheumatoid arthritis, cardiovascular disease, inflammatory bowel disease, depression, and then some strategies to reduce stress could be journaling, talking with a friend, walking in the park or forest, breathing in lavender or scented candles.
And actually, walking outside is really good for relieving stress. Between just being outside, because for one, being outside itself is good for relieving stress, And also like walking, like I think it just has to do with the motion. Like it's very like that one's especially stress relieving. And I don't have
Yeah,
data on it right now, but I know there is data on that.
like on why walking, like
Yeah,
like why it physiological, like maybe the
right. Like why
physiological.
exactly, yeah.
That'd be maybe we can look into that sometime too, because that would be
Yeah.
interesting to understand like why and how, and especially just nature in general, like why. Like, is it the air? I mean, there's probably a lot of factors, but that'd be interesting to learn too. Because are you talking about inflammation or
Oh,
just
I'm just talking about stress in general.
okay?
Okay,
Yeah, so
so
like well-being.
I can just read this really quick actually.
Okay,
I just Googled it. So, walking can help relieve stress by NDSU, so university. Research has shown that walking promotes the release of brain chemicals called endorphins that stimulate relaxation and improve our mood. Walking does not have to be done at a fast pace to have stress relieving benefits. Even a stroll at a comfortable pace promotes relaxation. Include, studies indicate. And then for being outside, when you move your body, you produce endorphins that will help you feel good. Outdoor activity is the ultimate de stressor. You'll cut your stress. Studies show that being in nature lowers your stress hormone cortisol and decreases your heart rate. And that is from intermountainhealthcare.org.
but I still wonder like why. I wonder if it's like an evolution, like because we used to live outside, so if
I
we're
would think
like
so.
if there's some evolutionary basis to that, like
If
ancestors
I
role
would,
basis, but
yeah. And I'd be curious if it has to do with the fact that, like, I feel like the fact that we have houses now and we live indoors might be more stressful because being enclosed, like, kind of makes you feel like you're hiding from something. Like, evolutionarily,
yeah,
at least. Like, you need, like, you're hiding, instead of being outside where you can feel a little more open. But I don't know. That's just, like, what might think. But
yeah. I mean,
I don't have evidence for that.
yeah, I can see that being like a reason for sure. Because like obviously we used to spend all of our time outside, like cooking and
Hmm.
hanging out with our family and all. Like previous our ancestors did
Yeah.
spend a majority of their time outside in the open and would mostly probably be inside to sleep and just for shelter if there was a storm or something. So it probably
Mhm.
was more indoors, was more, even if they weren't hiding from like
Like a bear.
people or like a bear or anything,
Mhm.
they would still go inside if it was storming. So it was still
Right.
more of like a we have to be inside to keep ourselves safe. So
Right.
now that we're always inside, I guess I can see that potentially being one of the probably many reasons that like it just feel like being
Yeah,
outside
it
feels more
probably triggers
comfortable
more stress in the body.
being inside.
Evolutionarily, yeah. I would
Yeah.
just because of that.
So then this one here from again NIA. I think most of my our studies or whatever you want to call them are from NIH. So inflammation, common pathway of stress related diseases. This one I just wanted to go over stress and inflammation. So large bodies of evidence indicate that stress can activate inflammatory response in the brain as well as peripherally. There exists communication between the neuroendocrine and immune system. Stress activates the HPA axis through the hypothalamic secretion of corticotropin releasing hormone, which normally suppresses immune responses through the release of glucocorticoids from the adrenals. GCs are one of the major stress hormones released during stress response that are well known for their immunosuppressive and anti inflammatory properties. Studies during the 1970s and 1980s revealed that GCs inhibited lymphocyte proliferation and cytotoxicity. Further, GCs reduce the expression of several pro inflammatory cytokines, tumor necrosis factor A, interleukin 6, and enhance the expression of anti inflammatory cytokines, interleukin 10, TNF beta B. However, recent researchers have proved that GCs also have pro-inflammatory impact on immune system. Rats with a higher basal plasma corticosterone levels have more accumulation of PGE2, whereas showing less anti-inflammatory factors after acute stress. GCs enhance the expression and function of inflammasome NLRP3, promoting the secretion of interleukin 1 beta in response to ATP. Inflammasomes are cytoplasmic multiprotein complexes that sense exogenous and endogenous danger signals and cleave pro-inflammatory cytokines into mature cytokines such as IL-1B and IL-18. This work demonstrates the pro-inflammatory role for GCs, enhancing the activation of the innate immune system in response to danger signals. Circulating pro-inflammatory factors such as IL-1, IL-6, and TNF-A directly stimulate the pituitary adrenal axis, resulting in increased serum levels of adrenocorticotropic hormone and GCs, which in turn inhibit the production of these pro-inflammatory factors. The interaction of immune system and HPA axis form the endocrine negative feedback loops. However, when the cytokine is overstimulated in some diseases, these negative feedback loops could be weakened by reduced cytoplasmic GC receptor level and decreased expression of GR-driven anti-inflammatory genes, thus leading to GC low responsiveness. Besides GCs, the SNS and its main neurotransmitter norepinephrine and neuropeptide Y could regulate the immune and inflammatory function. NE promoted the secretion of inflammatory factors by increasing the phosphorylation of mitogen-activated protein kinases through an A receptor-dependent pathway, and NPY could elicit transforming growth factor B and TNF-A production in macrophage-like cell line. Ra 264.7 via Y1 receptor. Both pro-inflammatory and anti-inflammatory mechanisms depend on the type and intensity of stressors. Acute stressors seem to enhance immune function, whereas chronic stressors are suppressive. Intense stressors overactivate the immune system, leading to the imbalance of inflammation and anti-inflammation. Reports from different labs have confirmed pro-inflammation induced by stress, including C-reactive protein, IL-6, TNF-A, IL-1B, and the transcription factor of nuclear factor kappa B. In addition to peripheral inflammation, central inflammation, namely neuroinflammation, has been found in stress condition. Elevated pro-inflammatory cytokines increased microglia activation and accumulation of peripherally derived monocytes, and macrophages were deleted in the brain with psychological stress exposure. As the brain-resident macrophages, microglia was considered to be the major pro-inflammatory cytokine source. Stress-elicited potentiate microglial activation is via both direct and indirect mechanisms. Microglia express both GC and the mineralocorticoid receptors, thus microglia are likely to have direct response to corticosterone peak. In addition, GC receptors also have highly present in the hippocampus and prefrontal cortex, so stress-induced corticosterone may have indirect effects on microglia. Besides this, a recent research displays that CNS innate immune system can respond to an acute stressor, thereby releasing the danger signal, high mobility group box 1 in the brain to prime microglia by activating on the NLRP3 inflammasome in preparation for IL-1B secretion. Activated microglia display hypertrophic branch morphology with an enlarged soma and produce an exaggerated cytokine to recruit peripheral monocytes, increase brain macrophages, and circulating monocytes, contribute to elevated levels of pro-inflammatory cytokine production in the brain. In common, overactivated immune system, increased activity through SNS pathways, and reduced GC's responsiveness may work tandemly in the activation of inflammatory responses during stress. GC's, catecholamine, cytokines, and other mediators released by stress are thought to be the main mediators in stress-induced pro-inflammatory effect. And then I was just going to go over their conclusion here quick. In summary, through disturbing the balance of immune systems, stress induces inflammation peripherally and centrally. This imbalance leads to diversified stress-related diseases. Although there might be various different triggering events, they appear to converge on inflammation. In this review article, we provide evidence that stress induces or worsens CVD, NAFLD, depression, neurodegenerative disease, and cancer through peripheral inflammation as well as neuroinflammation. Stress engenders central microglia and astrocytes, blood vessel, immune system, and liver by mainly activating SNS and the HPA axis. Therefore, we suggested that inflammation may be the common pathway for stress-related diseases, which may act as a factor that contributes disease progression or may occur very early during the development of the disease. Figure 1b shows that multifactorial factors, including genetic predisposition, aging, and lifestyle, act on stress-related disease, and that stress-induced chronic low-grade inflammation is the common soil of a wide variety of chronic diseases. And then this is just their image.
Cool.
And then one more here. Just from Harvard. This just kind of goes over. Oh, what is that doing? Understanding the stress response. I think I wanted to say. Basically, I just wanted to talk about so again, just reinforcing chronic stress contributes to high blood pressure, promotes the formation of artery clogging deposits, and causes brain changes that may contribute to anxiety, depression, and addiction. May also contribute to obesity, both through direct mechanisms or indirectly. And then this just kind of talks about what we've talked about, the biological response. And then there are techniques, kind of like we also talked about yoga, tai chi, exercise.
Yes, movement therapies.
Yes. But I guess I just wanted to, with these articles, iterate that there's a difference, obviously, between chronic stress and acute stress, in that chronic stress, can affect the immune system. In theory, what the studies seem to show is that it can affect the immune system and inflammation, which also can lead to disease. So just wanted to provide some, because that's always been just in my head, that makes sense that happens, but I wanted to obviously provide some evidence to support my theory a little bit, so that I'm not just going around making false claims based on what I believe. But
next, we're going to do something here. We are going to take the ACEs quiz. So, the Adverse Childhood Experiences, or ACEs quiz, was developed in the 1990s through research conducted by the CDC and Kaiser Permanente. Researchers determined that 10 specific traumatic childhood experiences, or ACEs, could be linked to a higher likelihood of health challenges later in life, and that the likelihood of these negative effects increased with the number of ACEs a child experienced. So physical, sexual, or verbal abuse, physical or emotional neglect, separation or divorce, a family member with mental illness, a family member addicted to drugs or alcohol, a family member who's in prison, witnessing a parent being abused. So still there are variables this quiz doesn't account for, including stressors outside of the home, as well as the important role positive influences play on buffering the effects of trauma. So for each yes answer, add 1. The total number at the end is your cumulative number of ACEs before your 18th birthday. So we're going to each take the quiz here together. And we can just do it at the same time and count it on our fingers.
Yeah, I'll write mine.
Okay, you can write yours down if you want. I'm just gonna. I'll just mark mine on here then, and then you can.
Yeah, you can mark. Yeah.
Okay. Did a parent or other adult in the household often or very often swear at you, insult you, put you down, or humiliate you, or act in any way that made you afraid that you might be physically hurt? So that's a yes for me. Don't know about you. I don't know if you want to say your answers or not, but
I guess I don't. But my question is a yes 1 point or is a no 1? I guess how does
a yes is 1 point.
Okay, so it's yes points. So yes is a point and no is not a point. Okay.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay.
All right. Did you get that question answered?
Yes.
Okay. Did a parent or other adult in the household often or very often push, grab, slap, or throw something at you, or ever hit you so hard that you had marks or were injured? So, yes, for me. Did a person or adult at least 5 years older than you ever... I don't know why it has to be 5 years older than you for this, honestly. I think that's a dumb disclaimer, but whatever. Ever touch or fondle you or have you touch their body in a sexual way, or attempt or actually have oral, anal, or vaginal intercourse with you? So, yes, again. And I mean, yeah. Because if this is before, yeah, I'm not going to say what I think actually, but yeah, there are some, this test isn't perfect. I'm just going to point that out.
Oh
But it
yeah.
is a decent test. It's better than nothing. So, yeah. Did you often or very often feel that no one in your family loved you or thought you were important or special, or your family didn't look out for each other, feel close to each other, or support each other? I'm going to say yes. And then, did you often or very often feel that you didn't have enough to eat, had to wear dirty clothes, and had no one to protect you, or your parents were too drunk or high to take care of you or take you to the doctor if you needed it? I'm going to say no, but that's only because I at least had one sober parent. So that helped me out. Were your parents ever separated or divorced? Yes. Was your parent caregiver often or very often pushed, grabbed, slapped, or had something thrown at her? Or sometimes often or very often kicked, bitten, hit with a fist, or hit with something hard? Or ever repeatedly hit over at least a few minutes or threatened with a gun or knife? Well, yeah, I'm trying to remember. No, that I don't think anything like that happened to my mom or my dad, I guess, either. It says her, but it could be your dad or mom
Oh
that this happened to, I would assume.
yeah, I would think either parent.
I think it's just, the stereotype is,
Oh yeah.
more women getting hurt than men. But yeah. But I would say that could apply to either parent.
Yeah, I guess I would think so too, but we didn't make the quiz, so I guess we can't say for sure, but I would
Right.
think it would be dumb if it
Yeah.
couldn't.
Right. Like
Because,
if your mom hit your dad, it would be just as traumatic, I
yeah,
would think, if your dad hit
definitely.
your mom. But yeah. Okay. Did you ever live with anyone who was a problem drinker, alcoholic, or who used street drugs? Yes. I don't like this question either. Because did they ever use what street drugs are we talking about? How often are we talking about? Like,
Is this talking about, is there an age limit for this?
yeah, if you were under 18. This is
Oh,
all for if
okay.
you're under 18.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, yeah, it just depends what street drugs you're using and how often you're using. Like, if your parent smokes weed, I don't think that's necessarily traumatic. Or even if they drink alcohol occasionally, that's not traumatic, but they don't mention that here. They just say problem drinker, alcoholic. Yeah,
Yeah.
but
I guess it'd be more so if it's like like where they can't control their use and it
exactly.
keeps them
Or
from taking care of their kids, is how I would
exactly. Yes.
assume it would mean. Maybe they just need to expand like
They just need to
definitions and
update this
stuff.
quiz, I think, is
Yeah.
what it is. Maybe we'll update it. Maybe we can go to them and give them the update. Was a household member depressed or mentally ill, or did a household member attempt suicide? That's a hard one for me to answer. I guess I'll say yes, technically. Because, if my dad, well, yeah, I have a parent who's an alcoholic, they're probably depressed as well. You know,
Yeah.
did a household member go to prison? Now, this one, it's hard to answer because they went to jail, not prison. So I guess it's technically no. But, like, they did go to jail. I do want to just point that out. That, you know,
Maybe it should also be
like they
just
should make.
incarcerated, not.
Yeah, they should be. Was a household member incarcerated?
But again, this is only for 18 and under, you said?
Yes,
Not so
18 and
once you're
under.
19. I mean,
Yeah, if
obviously
you're
any of
like
this can
if your
affect
dad
you
like
at
if
any
your
age,
mom or dad
but
went to prison when you were 19, then no, you wouldn't count it because it's adverse childhood events. Or is it
okay.
events?
I think so.
Experiences. That's what
Oh,
adverse childhood
experiences. Okay.
experiences.
Can we go through them one more time? Just the
Oh,
questions. I
all
just
of
want
them?
just quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Do you have
like you
to
don't
read them
just a
or just
brief.
scroll?
You can. Oh, yeah, you can just scroll. But let me.
Okay, let me know when to scroll down then.
You can scroll.
Okay.
You can scroll. You can scroll. You can scroll.
Okay.
Okay.
So I'm gonna finish my quiz. Yep, this
Okay.
is exactly the score I got before when I've taken in the past. 7 out of 10.
Oh, okay.
So let's look at these really quick. What does your ACE score mean? The quiz
Yeah.
score is based on 10 types of childhood trauma measured in the original ACEs study. 5 are personal: physical, verbal, sexual abuse, physical neglect, and emotional neglect. 5 are related to other family members: parent who's an alcoholic, victim of domestic violence, in jail. Oh, so I guess I was supposed to answer that in jail thing as a yes.
Hmm.
A family member diagnosed with a mental illness, and the disappearance of a parent through divorce, death, or abandonment. You get 1 point for each type of trauma. The higher your ACE score, the higher your risk of disease, social, and emotional problems as an adult. So, what was your score, if I may ask?
2.
Oh, good job. You did it. You had a good shot, dude.
Huh?
Congratulations. I mean, I'm not saying that nothing bad ever happened in your job.
No, I know.
But yeah, I mean, that's a good score. It's under 4, so that's healthy.
Yeah, I mean, I feel pretty healthy mentally, but I've had to work on it too. But
Yeah. So let's see. First, there are many experiences that could be traumatic for children that the quiz doesn't take into account or ask about, such as community violence, poverty, housing insecurity, racism, other forms of discrimination, natural disasters, chaotic environments, isolation, lack of services, and more. This means answering all the questions on the ACE quiz will not give a full picture of the adversity a child has faced, and thus would not be a true indicator of possible risk, nor a full picture of the possible solutions communities should consider. Second, everyone is different, and adverse experiences in childhood affect each child differently. Just because a person has experienced several ACEs does not mean that later social, emotional, or health problems are inevitable. Some children develop resilience, the ability to overcome serious hardships, while others do not. I guess they should expand on why that is. Like I would say the children that develop resilience probably have better access to support and resources than the children who do not. That would be my guess.
yeah, and anyone, even later in life, resilience is something that you can develop. Just
Yeah.
because you may not be resilient now, you doesn't mean you can't become like it's something you have to work on. I would say it's something I've
Yeah,
had to
but
work on.
it is something you have to work on as well. But it is something that also requires like a support system and certain resources sometimes. That you
Yeah,
need access
sometimes.
to.
Yeah,
Like I think not that you can't develop resilience if you don't have those things, it just makes it like way harder to do. And you just have more adversity to overcome in that case. Without the,
yes,
you know what I mean? But it's not that it's
yes.
impossible. That's not what I'm trying to say.
No, I know. I
I
just
just want to be clear.
we just have to. I guess for me, what I had to do. But again, I understand that everyone is different. We're all different humans. But I just had to not let feeling like I don't know how to explain it. Basically, we have to sometimes kind of start to take care of ourselves in a way
Yeah, but at the
where we
yeah.
don't let these holdbacks hold us
Right.
back
I mean,
but I
yeah.
understand that's not easy but we also have to take I
I mean,
think there's a tiny bit of personal responsibility is what I'll say.
there is like, I don't like the term personal responsibility, but yeah, there is a level of accountability for
Okay,
yourself that you need.
accountability.
I guess I would phrase it that. I just because I've heard the term personal responsibility in way too many negative contexts. That it's just a
Oh,
personal preference of mine. It's not like it's
yeah.
inherently bad or anything, but that's just how I've heard the phrase used. But
Yeah, I
yeah,
think
no, like
it can be.
personal accountability is important, but I don't think like it's maybe not impossible, but like it's very close to impossible, I think, to develop resilience without at least one person to support you.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that.
Like
But I
it's
guess
both. It's a
when,
balance of like your own
yeah,
self accountability and reaching out for help when you need it.
yeah. And I guess when you say that, I think that could be a friend though too, because not
Yeah, of
everyone
course.
can afford therapy, but don't let therapy keep you from healing. Don't let
Oh
that be
yeah,
your excuse not to heal,
yeah. I
because there
mean,
are free resources online, and your friends should. I mean, I know our friends are not our therapists, and I would never, if your friend is not willing to be that type of person for you, then that's their right, I guess. That's their choice. You can't force them to
yeah,
be able to talk about your problems with, but you should have friends who you can open up to and be, at least in my opinion,
yeah.
you should, like,
I
those are,
agree.
you should have people you can be open to. Not
Yeah, whether it's
everyone,
like
but
friends or family or whoever.
yeah,
Like it doesn't. Yeah, like a support system doesn't have to be professionals if you can't have access to those things.
yeah.
Although if you do have access to those things, I highly recommend them.
Oh
But
yeah.
if you don't, then you can still have a support system. There's free support groups you can go to, for example, for all types of things. And then as you said, friends and family as well. So yeah,
Yeah, I just don't want people to feel like, with all their ish,
yeah,
like, what are those called, barriers, that they can't heal, because we all can, but it's not easy. I will say that it is not easy at all,
right,
but we can.
yeah, and yeah. So genetic factors also play a role in that some children are predisposed to be more sensitive to adversity than others. And the most common factor among children who show resilience is at least one stable and responsive relationship with a supportive adult. Oh, that's what I was saying before. Cool. Finally, the ACEs quiz doesn't consider the crucial role protective factors such as supportive relationships play in buffering the effects of trauma and toxic stress in a child's life. And the other thing, I was actually talking to my mom about this, but we were saying we pretty much came to the conclusion that like another big thing that this is missing is children with chronic illnesses.
Yeah.
Like that would definitely impact like your ACE score. Like it should at least. That should be part of it as well.
Oh yeah, because
I mean, the ACE quiz shouldn't just be 10
managing.
questions long. I think it should be a longer quiz with all of these things included. Because then we can actually use these ACE scores more accurately to help children heal and to help adults heal too.
Yeah.
Oh, and then how can learning my score be helpful? The ACEs quiz is a helpful tool for raising awareness about the potential impacts of ACEs on both an individual and community level. When we know more, we can do more. Understanding how trauma has long lasting impacts is a key part of healing and, most importantly, prevention. But each and every one of us is strong and capable of recovery. In fact, receiving an ACE score is often a transformative time for individuals on their path toward recovery. We encourage individuals to visit the resources listed below to learn strategies for healing and also to learn how this information can be used as a powerful tool for parents and caregivers who want to break the cycle of trauma that's often passed down among generations. So, yeah, it doesn't define you, but an ACE, they don't mention the number here, but an ACE score over 4, if you were following along and taking the quiz with us, if you have an ACE score over 4, that's where it really starts to impact like your social and behavioral and your physical and well-being and all, and your psychological well-being and all of that. So 4 or higher is the number there. 4 out of 10. So we're going to talk about stress management tips from the Mayo Clinic. I'm not going to go super into depth with these. I think we can understand them pretty easily if I just read them off really quick.
Yeah.
So getting active pumps up your endorphins and enhance your self-well-being. We said that already. Eating a healthy diet, avoiding unhealthy habits, meditating, laughing more, connect with others, assert yourself. That one I think is important too, because if you bottle up all of your needs instead of expressing them, then that's going to be unhealthy and make you feel more stressed as well because you're not having your needs met.
Yeah.
And then try yoga, get enough sleep, keep a journal, get musical and be creative, and seek counseling if you have access to that. So those are some stress relieving tips. All right, and then this really quick article here. This is from Summa Health. Stress management, how to tell the difference between good and bad stress. You may think any type of stress is bad, but that isn't the case. Good stress, or eustress, is the type of stress you feel when you're excited. Your pulse quickens and your hormones surge, but there is no threat or fear. You might feel this type of stress when you ride a roller coaster, compete in a game, or go on a first date. Good stress is short-term and it inspires and motivates you, focuses your energy, and enhances your performance. Bad stress, however, is the kind that wears you out, leaves you jittery, and is harmful to your health. Bad stress or distress can lead to anxiety, confusion, poor concentration, and decreased performance. Bad stress can be short-term, acute, or long-term, chronic. Acute stress doesn't take a heavy toll on your body if you can find ways to relax quickly. However, chronic stress, when you repeatedly face stressors, can take a heavy toll on your body and cause negative health effects. Chronic stress can cause headaches, insomnia, weight gain, anxiety, pain, and high blood pressure. Common chronic stressors include relationships, money, work, unmanaged health or mental health problems, racial inequalities, and perceived loss. Both good and bad stress result in your body releasing hormones such as adrenaline and cortisol that trigger common signs of stress, butterflies in the stomach, racing heart, and sweaty palms. Ultimately, what distinguishes good from bad stress is how you react to or feel about the experience. So, how to reduce bad stress? Some more tips here. Eliminate stress where you can, learning to say no more often, paring down your to-do list, and avoiding people who stress you out is a great place to start. Learning to manage your time more effectively will make your stress levels go down. Accept there are events you can't control. There are things in life beyond your control, such as someone else's behavior. Instead of stressing about what you can't control, focus on what you can control and how you can react to the problem. That way you are expending your energy where it can be more effective. Think positive thoughts. Negative thoughts can lead to negative behavior, while a positive attitude can help offset difficult situations. Make an effort to think positively by looking for the upside in every situation. Whether you learn from your mistakes or use major challenges, it's a time for personal growth. In addition, thinking about all the things you appreciate in your life, including your own positive qualities, can change your perspective. Getting support. Confide in family and friends or turn to someone professional. Expressing how you feel can be cathartic. Also, it's important to express your feelings instead of bottling them up because that can add to your stress. Add relaxation techniques to your everyday routine. Relaxation promotes overall health and gives you a chance to step away and clear your head. It doesn't have to be a big time commitment. It can be accomplished with deep breathing exercises, meditation, or even yoga. Stay healthy and fit. A well-balanced diet and staying active ensures your body is better prepared to fight stress. Exercise relaxes your body and mind while improving your mood. In fact, physical exercise has been proven to play a key role in preventing and reducing the effects of stress. Now, one thing I will say, I think just staying healthy is good. Like, even if you're exercising and you're not like losing weight or getting fit, don't give up on the exercise. The exercise is still good for you. Even if you're not necessarily losing weight, it will still help your health in the long run. I
Yes.
want to point that out. And then getting a good night's rest. Getting enough rest is really important because it gives your body time to recover from stressful events and sets you up to fight new challenges the next day. The key is identifying good stress from bad stress. As long as it's not chronic, stress can be a positive addition to your life. Make an effort to reduce your chronic stress as much as possible and add positive activities to promote good stress. It creates a healthy balance and a better quality of life. All right, now I'm actually gonna do my conclusion now because it's more related to the article,
Oh, yeah.
and then you can go over yours.
Okay.
So basically, the conclusion from that article: there is a healthy level of stress that one can maintain. Complete lack of stress leads to hypercomplacency, which in turn leads to not accomplishing anything, and then that in turn can actually decrease your mental health as well. Because when you don't get that dopamine from accomplishing things, you're gonna have overall a worse mood, and that's gonna be worse for your body as well. But high levels of stress are very unhealthy for the body as well. So managing a healthy level of stress that can motivate and energize you is the goal to aim for. Yeah.
Okay. And then I just have one more kind of article study to go over related to, let me get it. So, again, NIH. So, anxious, depressed, you might be suffering from capitalism, contradictory class locations, and the prevalence of depression and anxiety in the United States. So, the abstract here, despite a well-established social gradient for many mental disorders, evidence suggests that individuals near the middle of the social hierarchy suffer higher rates of depression and anxiety than those at the top or bottom. Although prevailing indicators of socioeconomic stratification cannot detect or easily explain such patterns, relational theories of social class, which emphasize political economic processes and dimensions of power, might. We test whether the relational construct of contradictory class location, which embodies aspects of both ownership and labor, can explain this nonlinear pattern. Data on full-time workers from the National Epidemiologic Survey on Alcohol and Related Conditions show that occupants of contradictory class locations have higher prevalence and odds of depression and anxiety than occupants of non-contradictory class locations. These findings suggest that the effects of class relations on depression and anxiety extend beyond those of SES, pointing to understudied mechanisms in social epidemiology, domination, and exploitation. So, social disadvantage is associated with higher risk of most adverse mental health outcomes. Indeed, disparities in both mental and physical health are firmly established across traditional measures of socioeconomic status, such as income, educational attainment, and other indicators of social rank. These measures capture, and their theoretical underpinnings predict, an inverse linear graduational relationship between SES and physical and mental illness. There is evidence, however, that individuals toward the middle of social hierarchies might actually suffer higher rates of internalizing affective disorders such as depression and anxiety than those at either the top or bottom. Such patterns are neither detected nor easily explained by standard approaches. Using traditional measures of SES, research since at least the 1930s has consistently documented that mental illnesses are more common among those with lower levels of income, education, and occupational prestige.
That's what I thought, yeah. That's what I've seen, but I'm interested in what this says, though.
Studies such as Whitehall 1 and 2 have generated important insights about the social production and distribution of health disparities by establishing social gradients in physical and mental health. Early on, these studies identified an unexplained residual social gradient after accounting for standard risk factors, and this motivated considerable scholarship and debate on potential additional causes and mechanisms that do not operate through the pathway of behaviorally mediated proximal risk factors. These generative insights prompted substantial research effort focused on relative versus absolute deprivation and workplace stress in its social construction. The granular occupational status hierarchies and longevity of the Whitehall cohorts have also facilitated productive investigations of social causation versus social selection mechanisms, complementing earlier tests of the causation/selection debate as it pertained to psychiatric disorders. Critics, however, have long admonished that traditional indicators of SES, such as income level, educational attainment, and occupational grade, are incomplete explanatory and control variables in population research. This is in part because such indicators arise from numerous political and economic processes, which may have significant indirect effects on health in addition to those mediated by typical measures of SES. Such processes traditionally have been understood through relational theories of class, which have had less traction in population health research. Instead, traditional measures of SES remain predominant due to relative ease of measurement and a research emphasis not on the causes of socioeconomic inequality, but on the effects of socioeconomic position on health. Focusing only on the latter, however, without understanding the processes of power, context, and meaning through which socioeconomic resources are obtained and experienced, may ignore other etiological pathways between political economic structure and mental illnesses. Furthermore, such measurement issues matter because standard approaches to SES may implicitly valorize extant social structures and therefore constrain the range of social and policy interventions deemed feasible and valid. The primary aim of the present study is to explore how social class may influence depression and anxiety in ways that may be masked or incompletely explained by standard SES measures. A secondary aim is to extend earlier efforts to introduce explicitly theory-driven operationalizations of social class into social and psychiatric epidemiology. In the remainder of this section, we briefly review the theoretical framework that informs traditional measures of SES and contrast it with the class theory that motivates our analysis. Next, we explore how class relations have been implicated historically in the etiology of depression and anxiety. We then identify related potential mechanisms for this relationship by connecting contemporary class theory to the literatures on job strain and job control. So, let me see how long this part is. We'll just stratificationist conceptualize of socioeconomic disadvantage provide the theoretical foundations for traditional measures of SES. Critics have observed, however, that studies that include simple stratification indicators such as income, education, occupational grade, etc., rarely make explicit reference to the theoretical underpinnings. The stratificationist perspective draws on the sociological tradition of structural functionalism, which contends that social stratification is universal, natural, and therefore most of a purpose. For example, suggested that functional necessity of inequality is to ensure that social positions of greatest functional importance to society are conscientiously occupied by the most motivated and qualified individuals. This is achieved by differential remuneration. Contemporary stratification indicators, however, are only de facto functionalist because they do not necessarily capture constructs that account for how individuals arrive in different social strata or address inequalities and interdependencies in the positions people occupy. Instead, they compromise attributes and conditions that are associated with people already situated within classes. As critics have argued, it may be more apt to consider stratification indicators as outcomes or proxies for processes that have already occurred rather than exposures. Doing so directs attention to more fundamental upstream antecedents responsible for numerous political economic pathways in addition to SES. In contrast, emphasis on processes and relations as opposed to mere position follows a rich tradition of Marxian and Weberian class analysis, in which class is properly understood not as an individual attribute but as an individual's relation to productive assets and their access to and exclusion from certain economic opportunities. In this relational perspective, classes are defined by mutually antagonistic self-interest, i.e. the material welfare of one group casually depends on the material deprivations of another. Elaborates that social position is not simply a function of individuals' inherited or achieved attributes, but arises from processes by which certain groups control productive resources. By excluding other groups from access to those resources and controlling their labor activities, domination, and appropriating the fruits of that labor, exploitation. Thus, beyond a sorting mechanism, class relations are ongoing, dynamic interactions, and it is within these relations that we seek to explore detriments of depression and anxiety. So, depression and anxiety, sequelae of class relations. We choose to focus this analysis on depression and anxiety because of historical attention to these outcomes in social theory, their prominence in social stress and social constructionalist models of psychiatric illness, and prior evidence of a nonlinear relationship with social class. They are the most common mental disorders in the general population and have been invoked by social theorists from Marx to Durkheim, Sartre to Senem. I'm not saying those right, but that's okay. Reflecting on the impact of capitalism on the psyche. The effect of class relations on the development of depression and anxiety can be anticipated at the conjuncture of social theory and the social stress paradigm. Alienation of workers from production and the products of their labor is thought to diminish self-efficiency and result in a sense of powerlessness and self-estrangement, i.e. engagement in activities that are not intrinsically rewarding. Weber extended the issue of alienation as powerlessness and took industrial workers as a special example of those afflicted by universal trends toward bureaucratization, mechanization, depersonalization, and oppressive routine. Regarding self-estrangement, Marcuse described the productive apparatus in advanced capitalism as shaping not only socially needed occupation skills and attitudes, but also individual needs and aspirations. Descriptions such as these are concordant with diathesis stress models of psychopathology, which emphasize the interaction between individuals' predispositions and stressful life experiences, both of which are themselves socially patterned and produced. In other words, relations to production and labor conditions may both shape and interact with the stressors to which workers are exposed and their reaction to those stressors. Such resources may include a variety of psychosocial constructs relevant to the development of psychopathology, such as self-efficiency, attributional dispositions, internalizing versus externalizing, locus of control, and workplace demand/control, or job strain. In particular, locus of control and job strain have been studied extensively with respect to work and affective disorders, although these constructs avoid explicit engagement with social class. For example, research using the National Longitudinal Surveys of the labor market experiences of several large age cohorts have examined the effect of powerlessness on physical and mental distress. Powerlessness exacerbates the effect of job and economic related stressful life events on psychophysiological distress and prospectively predicts greater activity limits, psychosocial symptoms, and deteriorating health conditions, controlling for demographic characteristics and baseline health.
So wait, did they say they measure this mental health? Do they do that through diagnoses, or do they like send out a survey or something that has symptoms on it and then they determine from there?
I don't think they've specified yet how they, at least I don't remember reading.
Okay.
I think this is just how they're like doing the study,
Yeah.
or gonna do the study, but I guess I don't know if it's
Because I
more
would,
subjective or
yeah.
um
Because I
what's
would,
that other
if it
word?
was through diagnosis and not through just asking about symptoms, like if they were just to do through diagnosis, I would think the results might be skewed because a lot of the lower class doesn't have access to those resources to get a diagnosis.
Yeah.
So I don't know how they did this, so I can't say for sure.
And maybe because I will read the conclusion too, because I feel like that will give
Yeah,
an understanding of what, and maybe then we'll find out in the conclusion, maybe.
maybe.
Similarly, extensive research has shown that psychosocial work stress and in particular job strain are important risk factors in the development of depression. Workers with jobs low in decision latitude and high in demand show higher depressive symptoms, and those with jobs low in direction, control, and planning, as defined by the U.S. Department of Labor, have higher psychological distress and major depression. Occupations with high degrees of direction, control, and planning over one's own and or others' work foster a sense of mastery and personal control, which in turn have been shown to be protective against depressive symptoms. Viewed from the perspective of relational class theory, these situational work experiences may act as mediators between class relations and mental health outcomes. In other words, as we discussed below, class relations may structure access to occupations with varying degrees of direction, control, and planning, which then determines risk of depression and anxiety.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
All right. Are there any other sections you're gonna read here? Or are you just gonna go to the conclusion?
I'll do this one quick too, and then I'll go to
Okay.
the conclusion. So, contradictory class locations and occupational control. Presumably, as one moves down an organizational hierarchy relative to owners, the more one encounters stress and adversity due to exploitation, alienation, and exposure to poor working conditions. It would therefore be reasonable to assume that the relationship between workplace status, and therefore SES, and depression and anxiety would be more or less inverse and linear, with lower status consistently translating into increased disorder. Yet, insights into contemporary class structure have led to hypotheses about the distribution of these disorders that are not readily predicted by such stratificationist theories and measures. Specifically, Wright's notion of contradictory class locations has been hypothesized to lead to psychosocial stressors that are known risk factors for depression and anxiety, and may explain why those occupying intermediate locations in class hierarchies appear to suffer higher rates of depression and anxiety than those at either the top or bottom. The concept of contradictory class locations emerges from Wright's effort to accommodate in modern class analysis the heterogeneous relations to production evident in post-industrial economies. In contemporary capitalism, around 85 to 90% of the labor force does not own the means of production and must sell its labor on the market, but much of that group does not perform the sort of manual labor commonly associated with the blue-collar working class, nor is it exploited and dominated in the same way. Wright classifies this group along two dimensions: the possession of skills and expertise and the degree of formal authority within organizational hierarchies in relation to production, both of which confer privilege and strategic advantage. For example, someone with valued and uncommon skills can obtain higher wages and more autonomy than unskilled workers. Likewise, upper management may receive delegated ownership authority to participate in developing company policy, whereas supervisors may be expected to implement company policy but not develop it, entitling them to higher wages/autonomy than workers, but lower wages/autonomy than managers. Such locations within class relations are contradictory because they embody aspects of both ownership and labor. As developed by Mutimer and colleagues and Wolfarth, the constructs of skills, expertise, and authority are conceptually related to Karsek's job strain model and research on occupational direction, control, and planning. The intersection of these two models suggests why contradictory class locations may predict adverse outcomes such as depression and anxiety relative to lower class positions. Broadly speaking, all but the highest level managers may be expected to enforce policies in which they have little say, while simultaneously facing the antagonism of subordinates.
I wonder if there's a solution to all this.
There is some empirical evidence that contradictory class locations confer elevated risk of depression and anxiety. Mutimer and colleagues observed in community-based longitudinal data from the epidemiological catchment area study that higher level managers displayed lower rates of major depression, anxiety disorder, and alcohol disorders than either supervisors or workers, while supervisors displayed higher rates of major depression and alcohol disorders than either managers or workers.
Yeah.
Subsequently, in the 2000 to 2001 Barcelona Health Interview Survey of 4,219 city residents, found evidence that the more contradictory the class location, the poorer the mental health of respondents. Thus, population-based studies suggest that contradictory class locations are important for mental health. However, these findings are from selected cities and do not represent the national class structure in the United States. Furthermore, the study in Barcelona used a non-diagnostic mental health measure, which has been found to be unassociated with social stratification or social class in European samples. Finally, a stronger test of the contradictory class locations hypothesis would allow distinctions between the private sector, where the concept and process of ownership is more straightforward, and the public sector. Nonetheless, the findings surmised above are inconsistent with the stratificationist theories of SES, which predict an inverse linear relationship between SES and mental health, but not with relational theories of class, which instead predict such nonlinear findings through numerous psychosocial mechanisms. The present study then builds on evidence regarding the role of contradictory class locations, explaining nonlinear patterns of mood and anxiety disorders by using a large nationally representative survey of the United States general population, the National Epidemiologic Survey on Alcohol and Related Conditions, which includes a fully structured diagnostic interview for the assessment of psychiatric disorders, as well as extensive measures of SES.
Can we just skim through the methods real quick and just try to see if they list how they do this?
So sample.
I don't think it'd be under sample though. Might be.
Well, I think
under the next one. What other sections do they have though? Because this is a long one. Dependent variables. Okay, here we go. I think it says right here. So it says that I think it says they were interviewed, and they just used the diagnostic tools from the DSM-4
so they weren't
it was not
professionally diagnosed.
Yeah. It doesn't look like it's like based on official diagnosis from a doctor, but like they use the same diagnostic tools to assess.
Oh, okay.
Is what I'm seeing from skimming here. Okay, that's all I really wanted to know.
Okay. Where's our conclusion? Our discussion. I think, yeah. I think it's called discussion instead of conclusion.
Because there's a lot more on the page.
Oh.
Like you're like halfway through.
I think a lot of that is references, yeah.
Okay, yeah, you're right. Okay, yeah.
So, discussion. Okay, so using a relational measure of class, we found that individuals who occupy more contradictory class locations have higher prevalence and odds of depression and anxiety than individuals in less contradictory class locations. As such, individuals' relation to production results in patterns of depression and anxiety distinct from those seen with traditional SES measures. These findings confirm results from prior studies that use measures of class based on the same neo-Marxian theory employed here, but extend the evidence by using nationally representative data that captures the contemporary national class structure in the United States. The finding that supervisors and managers tend to have higher prevalence and odds of depression and anxiety than both owners and workers is important for understanding the etiology of depression and anxiety vis-a-vis social stress theory and has implications for measuring SES versus class. Regarding stress theory, our findings suggest that class relations may structure exposure to depressionogenic and anxiogenic occupations, and that stresses from workplace domination and exploitation may extend beyond those associated with the relative material disadvantage that is a consequence of domination and exploitation. While social stress theory does not preclude a diversity of stressors and stress reactions that have different effects on physical and mental health, our findings imply that social distribution of some labor-related stressors may not fit a stratificationist framework that views said distribution linearly along a social gradient. Contradictory class locations may entail greater exposure to exogenous stressors consistent with the job strain model. They may also have an impact on individuals' interpretations of and responses to stressors encountered as a function of class location. Thus, it may not only be the social position that one occupies, but how one came to occupy and ascribe meaning to it. That is implications for depression and anxiety. For example, relation to production may play a role in individuals' attributional dispositions, wherein low-level supervisors attribute their occupational conditions as resulting from internal personal failings, whereas workers attribute their exploitation, alienation, and lower levels of occupational control to factors external to themselves. Research has consistently shown that external attributions are protective against low self-esteem and internalizing disorders such as depression. The notion that the subjective meaning of social location is important for mental health is also suggested by research on subjective social status. Using data from the Whitehall 2 study of British white-collar civil servants, researchers found that SSS was a strong predictor of depression after controlling for traditional measures of SES, such as income, occupational grade, and education. While SSS may represent merely an averaging and therefore more accurate index of traditional SES indicators, or alternatively the reverse causation of depressed or anxious individuals, biased rankings, it may also capture individuals' subjective interpretation of their social position and the meaning attached to it. Our findings provide evidence for the effects of social structure on mental health through mechanisms intertwined with the distribution of material goods. Although many of the mechanisms that bring structural phenomena under the skin are ultimately proximate and psychosocial, this does not necessarily imply that proximate psychosocial interventions are the appropriate response to the findings described in the study. Furthermore, our findings are consistent with the recommendations for redistributive policies and workplace democracy, stemming from studies that tested hypotheses about other psychosocial mechanisms. That said, a relational class perspective is consistent with evidence that interventions at the level of the workplace environment are minimally effective because meaningfully changing conditions such as worker autonomy requires changes to the very structure of wage labor, i.e. class relations. The present study is limited by its reliance on proxies for capital assets, skill, expertise, and authority that define contradictory class locations in relation to production. We choose to focus on ownership and control over the means of production because it's the essence of a relational class approach, and because existing psychiatric epidemiological data do not currently permit a deeper examination of rights class typology. Direct measurement of rights class typology would entail questions about decision-making authority and possession of skills/expertise via self-report and/or occupational codes. The ideas for did not include direct measures such as these. If we had direct measures of skill/expertise and authority, either self-reported or objective, we might expect to find more nuanced associations between class location and depression/anxiety. For example, on the dimension of skill/expertise, we might expect unskilled managers to have higher depression and anxiety than skilled managers. To our knowledge, no large representative population data exists in the United States in which such hypotheses can be tested directly. In addition, we were unable to test directly whether workplace exposures act as mediators between class relations and mental health outcomes. If class relations structure access to occupations with varying degrees of direction, control, and planning, this may explain the increased odds of depression and anxiety for managers and supervisors. We hope the present study underscores the importance of further pursuing this line of inquiry. Our proxies are somewhat sensitive to occupations considered worker. The effect of contradictory class location was reduced as we added occupations to the worker category or reduced the income cutoff for owners. Nonetheless, our proxies support the hypothesis that individuals in contradictory class locations are at greater risk for depression and anxiety than individuals in non-contradictory locations. This is because, despite a weakening of effect, findings were made in the same direction, and the reduction in the magnitude of the effect of contradictory class locations conforms to our theoretical framework. When we added occupation to the worker category or reduced the income cutoff for owners, we were also clearly adding some managers, supervisor, and individuals with special skills/expertise. In other words, we added non-differential misclassification to our categorization that we would expect to bias our results toward the null. Our definition of owner as self-employed and earning the 90th percentile in annual income, 75th percentile in the sensitivity analysis, may have resulted in an underestimation of the effective contradictory classification on depression and anxiety. This is because despite income cutoffs, the owner category likely included the singularity self-employed and small employers who may face work-related stresses more similar to managers and supervisors than the traditional capitalist class. This may also explain why owners sometimes have had higher prevalence and odds of disorder than workers. Our findings are also limited by the NISARC's reliance on self-report for SES measures and a lack of clinical assessment of psychiatric disorder, which may result in spurious findings of cognitive biases related to SES responses. We also analyzed NSARC's data cross-sectionally, thereby limiting causal inference about the temporality of the association between class location and disorders. Regarding comparative methods in the measurement of socioeconomic position and social psychiatric epidemiology, our findings illustrate the need, as articulated by others, for explicitly theory-driven operationalizations of socioeconomic position. This is not to say that traditional measures of SES, such as income and education, are not important and meaningful constructs for certain questions, but rather to suggest that understanding how socioeconomic position drives health outcomes is more complex than any single measure can convey. More precise measures of class via occupational skills, expertise, and authority already exist from the U.S. Department of Labor. Other constructs may be more difficult to routinely measure. For example, sociologists and social epidemiologists have calculated more traditionally defined exploitation rates for the manufacturing sector using the World Bank's World Development Indicators for value added as percentage of gross domestic product. Such measures would provide objective quantitative counterparts to psychosocial measures discussed above and represent an underexplored line of inquiry. The findings of the present study allude to broader social problems that are the result of the political economic arrangements of post-industrial capitalism in the developed world, characterized by deregulation, privatization, capital mobility, the dismantling of trade unions and other working-class institutions, the withdrawal of the state from social provision, and domestically, the replacement of the manufacturing sector with the service sector. The health consequences of these trends have been reviewed extensively elsewhere, and the consequences for class relations are complex and manifold. As we have not tested hypotheses about such forces directly, the purpose of the present discussion is to emphasize the need for population health research to explicitly acknowledge the political economic context in which quantitative measures of socioeconomic inequality are situated and engage openly with the theoretical framework that informs whatever operationalization is chosen. Our study used a large naturally representative sample and dissected measure of depression and anxiety to identify and explore an apparent contradiction in the dominant social detriments of health discourse, i.e. a nonlinear relationship between social class and certain mental illnesses. We documented how the political economic arrangements that give rise to SES may affect depression and anxiety via relational class mechanisms in a nonlinear, non-graduational fashion. This was seen in supervisors and managers' high prevalence and odds of depression and anxiety relative to workers and owners. Our findings suggest that class processes such as domination and exploitation warrant explicit attention in social and psychiatric epidemiology. Whew, okay.
Cool.
So yeah, I just felt it's important to... that one more so talked and discussed like supervisors and mainly roles where you don't really have any power, like you don't have a say, but you have to enforce rules and stuff, but you don't have a say in what those rules are. And I can understand how that can definitely lead more to mental illness just because that's powerlessness. But then I also would say just in the capitalist society where we have to be constantly working is just going to increase anybody's stress. It's just I think capitalism itself is just inherently stressful personally, which as we talked about, chronic stress is not good for your health. So I think it's just, I guess I don't have, but I guess they mentioned, like I think you have mentioned, I don't know if you mentioned it on the pod, but you've mentioned to me before, like working democracies.
Oh yeah, workplace and then democracy.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that would definitely improve the mental health of like every worker, except maybe the people at the top. But that's a fine sacrifice to make if we need to, in my opinion. But
But it shouldn't even
But it
like
shouldn't affect
affect
it
them. No.
because they still have a say too.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
It
just that
wouldn't.
everyone's a little more equal in the workplace.
Yeah.
Everyone has a say in how things are run, or at least the things that are run that are relevant to them.
Yeah, exactly. Which is
Like
good
I think
because
like a salesperson shouldn't be involved in like the recipe for the food they're selling, for example, necessarily. But like they should be
yeah,
involved in like how, like who we sell to, who we try to sell to and all that. Like that should be,
and like their hours that they work and
yeah, and their wages.
yes, yeah, that should all be like there because yeah, otherwise that definitely can lead to a powerlessness, which I feel capitalism inherently feels powerless because we have to work to live. You can't not work and live. And you
Right.
don't get a say in how much money you're making, which also adds another layer of powerlessness because some people then may need to work multiple jobs just to make a basic living wage, which is insane. That should not happen. It's no wonder that
Yeah.
America also has the worst healthcare system and the most just the worst. I mean, and I know other like we're not obviously the only. I'm pretty sure the whole world runs off capital, but some of them run off of like a capitalism slash social with socialist policies, I guess you could say,
Yeah.
which is better, a little bit
Right.
better, not perfect, but
Like co-ops and stuff.
yeah. But yeah, stress. There's just a lot. I feel like with stress to that is good to understand, even just a little bit. But
Yeah.
you
Exactly.
you did you have anything else to add or
No.
okay? So, you guys can leave a comment below letting us know what you want us to talk about in future episodes.
You can find us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and we sometimes Twitch live streams, so look out for those.
Yes, so don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you know when we do. Otherwise, we will see everyone next time.